thought today I would play a little KSP2 and mess around and build an airplane. This is going to be a starter plane, so I'm only going to be using the kind of the first, well, the first aircraft pieces you get when you unlock them in research. You've got an intake, a set of wheels, um, a wing, and a stabilizer, two cockpits, and an engine. So, in your fuel tank. This is, I think, everything I'm going to be using. And being able to build a plane with just these parts is important because it means you don't have to spend science to unlock a bunch of other things, because some of the other aircraft parts can be buried. Here we go. So yeah, so the next set of, like, if you want like the SR-71 style parts and the like the jets with afterburners, you've got to get all the way up to tier 2 and down here, which can, if you can see these science prices are much higher. So anything you can build using just parts from down here is a win, especially in the early game. First thing I want to do is drop in a cockpit. Now, I think a lot of people like this one because it kind of looks like a fighter jet. The drawback of this is that you have no place. Well, it makes actually building your aircraft a little more complicated because there's no place to put an air intake, right? So yes, you can add them, but when you're just starting out, you want to build an aircraft, this is probably not the route to go. I would recommend this one because you have a built-in spot for an air intake and a built-in spot for an engine. Boop. So, like 80% of your work is done, right? So you do that, and boop, boop, boop. There's your fuselage right there. Throw some wings on that, slap some wheels on, and we're good to go. And actually, that's what I'm going to do. Aircraft, pretty much from the beginning, they're always complicated, and that is because you need to balance thrust, your mass, and your center pressure or center of lift. And the way the positions of these with respect to each other determine a lot about the aircraft. So as I build this, I'll be referencing those and explaining what's going through my head. I'm very fond of the gull wing design, which is when you have wings that point down and then they come back up. That's the gull wing. And then there's the reverse gull wing, which actually goes up and then down. Actually, I'm going to go gull wing first. So we'll do this. Boop. All right. And so when I'm starting out, I kind of just like to do the general shape, and then so I'll put all the parts on in the general way I want, and then I'll use these visualizers here to adjust them to get the correct balance of everything so it'll fly. And if you learn how to use these three tools correctly, you actually can determine with a high probability, although not a certainty, whether or not and how well an aircraft will fly before you even take it to the runway. So first thing is, this is going to be the root of the wing. Let's go ahead and bring this down. So here. Do a little more. I'm probably going to recess these into the fuselage a bit. Yeah. The wing angle we can bring forward a little bit. Root length we can bring down. Thickness I like to bring up. Now, all these changes affect the aerodynamics of the wing and by extension the aircraft, and it's so it affects like stall speed, max speed, wind resistance, amount of lift, all that stuff. I'm not going to explain all of that, but just so you know, it's not 100% aesthetic. All right, so here we go. That looks about right. Bring these forward. The general rule to follow is, like, like think about what airplanes look like, and if it looks right, then it probably flies right. So if you think about like aircraft that go really fast, they tend to be very pointy. So aircraft that go slow or carry a lot tend to have very straight wings, right? And that is reflected in the game because it does model aerodynamics. So I tend to go for the slower speed wing with the better lift profile. Meaning basically I don't make them pointy, right? Because if they're pointy, not only can you go fast, but you have to go fast in order to fly, which means your takeoff speed is faster, which means you have more opportunity to lose control on the runway and crash, and it means your landing speed is high, which makes it means the margin of error for a successful landing decreases dramatically. And landing is, go figure, the hardest part of flying an aircraft. So yeah, I like to make that easy on myself. So I'm going to bring this down and then push this out. So these are going to be the flaps, and they are not going to be controlled by any of the normal like flight input controls. So they're not like pitch, yaw, and roll are not going to affect these. I'm going to basically toggle these on and off, and I'll use these for takeoff and landing. Is that how's that look? There we go. Perfect. Yeah. If you make the tip thicker like this, generally you want the base to be thicker than the tip. And so if you're going to make the tip thicker, you want the base thicker, like I've done here. And if you do that, then it becomes easier to put wings on wings. And I got to make sure the wing is right set up. If it does that, it's going to be upside down. So the lifting direction is downward. So I want to see the color. So the lifting direction is upward. All right. So let's bring this down. All right, that's pretty good. Can bring the thickness up a little bit. Excellent. Yep. Here, rotate these bad boys. All right, it's perfectly level. I like to have them a little bit up. In an aircraft wing design, anhedral and dihedral. So anhedral is when the wings point down from the fuselage, and dihedral is when they point up from the fuselage. So this wing is both, right? And when you put your wings on, anhedral wings, like say if the whole wing was anhedral, these decrease the stability of the aircraft, which make it unstable, but make it more maneuverable. If you make them dihedral like this, it increases the stability, right? So you'll see this on the smaller planes. The wings will be upward slightly. And then if you mix and match like this, you get a little bit of both. There are other factors like whether or not your center of lift here is above or below your center of mass, right? And then forward and backward also matters, but in terms of like stability, if your center of lift is below the center of mass, then you think of it as like you're balancing a ball on a top of a point. It's unstable, right? So it means the craft is more maneuverable, right? And if you put the center of lift above the center of mass, then it's more stable. So I'm just going to make something that I like visually. Yeah, that works. There we go. Let's see. I think it's a little pointy. So let's make the tip. And honestly, it feels a bit long. So we're going to pull that back just a little bit. Cool. All right, I'm going to bring these down and push them. Oops, push them out. These are the ailerons. They will control roll. And I like to just, I don't like to use them on the whole wing. Obviously, the more surface area that makes up the control surface, the more impactful it is on the way the thing flies. A lot of cases, I find that is that much control surface is not necessary. And I have discovered that having a little area between the flaps and the ailerons, having a little area in here is actually pretty useful because you can put things like wheels or engines. You know, if you didn't have an engine here, you could make an engine pod out here, which is actually something I plan to do on the next plane. So, got that. Let's put some elevators on here. Not like that. What's going on here? There we go. All right. And then the anhedral and dihedral effects of the plane, of the wing, also apply to the tail. So if you see an aircraft, like a lot of jetliners, airliners will do this, they'll have a dihedral tail, and that increases the stability of tail. And if it's anhedral, a lot of jet fighters have like this because it reduces stability and makes it more maneuverable. So, yeah, that's fine. All right. Let's bring them down a little bit. These are control surfaces, which means the entire thing will turn, which actually gives you a lot of maneuverability. If you were just put another wing back here, you'd only get the little flap. And I find that no matter how big that flap goes, you can make it all the way up to like 50% here. It's just not enough. So I go with the control surface, but that actually means you can go with a pretty small control surface, which means the span comes down there. That's what I'm looking for. Like that. And like that. Honestly, that's actually bigger than it needs to be. But it's fine. Okay. That's a nice little plane. And then I want a rudder. Oh, that's why this wasn't snapping. Oh, okay. Oh, there we go. Do that. Okay. All right, the rudder. Put here. Boop. Perfect. And this thing can come way down as well. All right, down here. Got that one. Tip length. There we go. That's pretty good. Set my controls. So advanced, you are roll only. You are pitch only. And you are yaw only. And I strongly recommend you do that when you're building an aircraft, is to limit what each control surface does. It just works better. Okay, so these guys, flaps, these are actually not controlled by anything, so I'm going to turn everything off. I'm going to deploy them, and I want them down when they're deployed, so I'm going to put them down. Alright, I'm going to leave them like that for now. Okay, let's put some wheels on this bad boy. Let's see how small is what you will have to start with. So we'll put these here. See? And the reason you might want to put wheels out here as opposed to in here is because when you are landing or taking off, the wider that rear wheel, the wider your wheelbase is, the less likely your aircraft is to tip over, especially at higher speeds. All right, and then here, front wheel. Okay, now there are some problems. I'm going to get to them. So another thing you want is the middle wheel should actually be extend down below the rear wheels. The rear wheels. Your takeoff and your landing is a lot easier if your aircraft is pointing up slightly. If your wings have a positive angle of attack, so they're not neutral, they're not like just level. So we'll get to that. Let's do that now. There's always a lot of tweaking involved. And it's one of the reasons I like building aircraft. All right. Oops. Not there yet. That's fine. So this is a challenge when you build with the gull wing that comes down and you put the wheels out here. You're going to get a connection point that's below the bottom of the fuselage. So you can sort of cause problems for yourself, but they're all fixable. All right, so at this point, I have the general design. So now let's look at center of mass is right there, center of lift. So in order for this thing to fly well, you generally want your center of lift to be slightly behind your center of mass. So the easiest way to do that is to move the wings back. And that will also affect your center of mass slightly, but not the same amount. So you usually have to tinker with it. So this is actually, I've seen planes like this. This is far too much. You want it here. So the center here is behind this center there, and it's really close. But that is good. The reason you don't want something like this is because the center of mass this far ahead of the center of lift. When you go to take off, as you build up speed, the lift will as you increase your speed, lift will increase, which means the upward force at this point becomes greater. And this is the center of mass. So if you think of like a teeter-totter or a seesaw, right? If you push up on this side, everything on the other side of this goes down. So as you increase your speed and the lift increases, this area behind the center of mass goes up. The nose actually starts to carry more weight as it's pushed down into the ground, which puts more pressure on this front wheel. So if you're going really fast and there's a bump or something on the terrain, it's going to deflect your path a lot more severely and it'll cause your aircraft to like wobble and start to crash, basically cause you to crash. So you want to put it here. Now you can say, well then this would be better, right? Put the center of lift in front of the center of mass, and then that won't happen at all. And you would be right about that. However, if you put it ahead, what happens is, yes, that's the taking off is no longer a problem. Set aside this, right? But what happens is once you're in the air, because the center of lift is so far ahead of the center of mass, your aircraft will tend to pitch up, which means it will tend to stall, and that means it's not going fast enough to fly, and then it'll head up and then fall. So you don't usually want that. There are exceptions. Anyway, so there we go. That is a good spot. This is a good way to check with this view here. All right, looks good. All right, now when you position the rear wheels, you want these. They need to be behind the center of mass. Otherwise, when you go to the runway, your aircraft will roll back on its ass. So that would be no good, right? Because it's in front. However, you don't want them like way back here, because this means now the fulcrum is the wheel. When you go to take off, even though your center of pressure is here for lift and your center of mass is here pushing down, when you go to take off, because the distance between the wheel and the center of mass is so great, you need basically the effective, you can think of it as downward force of the mass is multiplied by the length, the distance here. So you don't need to know the numbers. It's just that the more distance here, the effectively the heavier the plane is, right, for this purpose. So if you bring this here, this distance is much shorter than that distance, which means it takes less lift to take off, which means you can take off at a lower speed. And the lower speed you can take off at means, again, the less pressure on your wheels, which means the less likely you are to wobble and then flip and roll if your front wheel hits something. So okay, we're still not level. That's okay. I'll get it. So that I want my wheels a little more forward. All right. Oh, that looks good. Cool. That looks like a plane, so it should fly like a plane. So, all right. So one thing I like to do when I find myself in the situation where pretty much lift and mass are balanced out, wheels are positioned correctly, but I still like, usually because I have a gull wing here, the back wheels are too low. I'll just slap an extra fuel tank on, like so. I'll get a fuel tank, put some end caps. So now the parts that you would have when you're building with this, you will only have this. So let me use that one. Put it on both ends. Then it's snapping on. We'll put this right here, and then we'll put this right there. There we go. Now this serves as ballast, and it gives it, and I think it gives it a cool little, like the little bulge kind of looks cool, really, no matter where it is on the plane. So I'm all right with that. It brings the center of mass forward, which is a problem. Whoops, that's okay. So here, bring this back a little bit. Actually, I needed it up here to put the wheels on, didn't I? So it's a balancing act, right? Okay, so now I've got the front wheel is lower than the rear wheels. So if I look at the line down here, so that's good. Building aircraft is complex. You're always having to balance like the position of your gear, the position of these three forces, your amount of fuel you have, where your pieces and parts go, your intakes, your engines, make sure you have enough air intake for your engines, big enough control surfaces, all that. You always have to do that no matter what aircraft you build, no matter what parts you're using. So they're complex, but that complexity doesn't really change throughout the game. I'm looking at, I got my wheel down where I needed it to be, or where I want it to be. Let's pull this out here. Center of mass, center of lift. Damn it. Okay. So to get the center of lift where it needs to be, I can pull this forward. So wheels are still fine. They're still behind the center of mass. Moving forward a little bit more. And that's it. That's actually fine. This should fly. This should fly just fine. There we go. Okay. Now I gotta get the controls. So I've got roll, pitch, and yaw. They will be they will work by default. One thing that will help eliminate instability during takeoff and landing is disabling steering on your rear wheels and disabling braking on your front wheel. And then another thing I like to do is adjust the suspension. So dampener is how much it slows down, how much it resists going down, which is what happens when you hit the ground. And then spring strength is how much it pushes back, like after it's done going down, and to go back to the normal spot. And this can affect a lot of times, like if you land with too much downward velocity, you can hit the ground and then bounce back up. And this is what affects that bounce back up part. So on the front, I like to drop this down to around 20 or 30 or so. Dampener, I'll leave at 1. On the rear, I'll bring these down to about 60, 50, somewhere around there. And max the dampener out. Also max braking out. Oh no, I don't do that. I don't know what I was thinking. I might bring this up a little bit. Okay. Steering's good, braking's good. Okay, now to the controls. I make use of the reserve groups, and generally, since aircraft don't have RCS, I use the RCS group to control my flaps. To just toggle them. So here we go. You and you, yeah, you. Toggle. You. Toggle, right? Perfect. All right. And for this engine, it's capable of reversing. So one thing I do is when I hit the brakes, I don't want the front wheel to brake at all. I know I set braking power to 0, but I do this as well. It's some redundancy. If I happen to forget one and not the other, then I'm covered. Like during this process right here. And then I'll set the engine to reverse. I will set it to reverse. I don't want to cycle, because if I tap the brakes, like every time I tap it, it's going to cycle forward or backwards, and that is not what I want. Okay, so is that it? That is it. I'm going to come down to the engine here. I hate this. Turn that off. That is that. Workspace. And here I'll put notes. RCS. Toggles flaps. Brakes. Sets reverse thrust. And retract flaps. And I'm not sure I did that, so I need to go back and do that. So here we go. Brakes. So when you're flying, when you put your flaps down to come into land, the flaps cause your they change the lift profile of your wings, right? And they cause the wings to generate more lift, which is useful because it means more lift means you can fly slower without falling out of the sky. So it's very handy for landing. However, once your wheels are on the ground, you want to do the exact opposite, because at that point, you want to take as much lift out of the wings as possible so that the aircraft doesn't bounce like back into the air, right? So adjusting the springiness of the suspension is one way to address that. And the other way is to do this, where you have your flaps. As soon as you hit the brakes, make those flaps automatically retract. So that is what I'm going to do here. And I will specifically set them to retract, not toggle. Because again, if I'm tapping the brakes, I don't want them going down and coming back up again. The first time I hit it, retract. Because if I'm hitting the brakes, then I believe that I am on the ground and I probably want to stay there. So, all right. And I have the RCS hotkey that will allow me to toggle the flaps down again if I need to. All right, so let's save that. Boop. All right, let's go fly it. Cool. All right, flaps down. Boop. Here we go. For design like this, and when it's well balanced and you've got a good angle of attack, you can expect to be able to rotate and lift off around 50 meters a second. Just like that. Nice and steady. Gear up. Flaps up. Climb up. And there you go. Nice little plane. I love it. Throttle them back.